Good morning. Please rise in body or spirit and join in our morning song, hymn 349. Please remain standing as we light our chalice and recite our covenant together. Enriched by our differences and joined together in our search for meaning, we covenant with ourselves and each other to seek truth in a spirit of love, to strive for justice, and to serve others with a joyful heart. You may be seated. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County. We are so glad that you've joined us today. My name is Chrissy Bushyager. I'm the Director of Religious Education. I am serving today with Reverend Ed Brock, our interim minister, Bob Rowland, our music director, Joy Thiessen, our pianist, and our wonderful UUCDC choir. We are supported by volunteers in our tech booth and our hospitality teams. This is our annual pumpkin bread and apple cider communion service, where we celebrate the harvest season and the bounty of our earth. This is a multi-generational service, which means that our children and youth are with us for the whole service, except for 7th and 8th graders who have OWL class today. So if you are a 7th and 8th grader and you are sitting here right now, please go to your OWL classroom. Thank you. If you are joining us on Zoom today, we invite you to use closed caption, if that would be helpful to you. We also encourage you to take a moment to go and grab a piece of bread or pastry or a cracker, something that you have in your house, and some liquid, cider, coffee, tea, whatever you have nearby, so that you can have that available to participate in our communion ritual later in the service. After the service, Zoom participants are invited to stay online for Zoom coffee hour. Those of you here in person can join us for coffee hour in Fellowship Hall after the service. If you ordered a pie from our Yucky youth group, make sure you remember to pick it up after the service. Our Yuckies were very busy yesterday morning, baking over 80 pies for you all. It was a lot of sticky, messy fun, and it was great. Reverend Ed will also be doing a town hall session after the service to discuss some proposed bylaws changes. So if you're interested in that, you can come back here after you've grabbed your cup of coffee and your yucky pies. There are a couple pies available for purchase if you forgot to order one. They did make a couple extras, so that is available. Now I invite you to enter into a spirit of worship together by joining in our centering song. Each week, we come to this place carrying whatever joys and sorrows we have on our hearts. At this time in the service, we have a ritual where we can drop a stone into a bowl of water. The stone represents the joys and sorrows. As we drop those into the bowl of water, the ripples represent the way those joys and sorrows can spread through our community, holding our joys and sorrows, the way our community holds those joys and sorrows. At this time, all are welcome to drop a stone into the bowl of water. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can share your joys and sorrows in the chat. I will drop an additional stone for all the joys and concerns expressed on Zoom and those who are not with us today.
Good morning. On this beautiful and glorious day, I share these words with you from colleague Barbara Paskin as a way to invite us into the special way of thinking and understanding the world that worship calls us into. For the beauty of the earth, this spinning blue-green ball, Gaia, mother of everything, we walk gently across your back to come together again in this place to remember how we can live, to remember who we are, to create how we will be. Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live, welcome us, as may we welcome you. Amen. I invite you now to a ritual of generosity as we share our resources with the common good for our offering. Thank you for your generosity.
I'm going to see if I can stand here and tell my story and not be picked up by the other mics over here. All right. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. So, this story is by Beryl Ashenberg, and it's about a man named Grandpa Allen. Grandpa Allen was a member of the Unitarian Church of Nottingham. And he was a beloved member. Everyone loved Grandpa Allen. They loved him because he did a lot of things at the church. He was friendly to everyone. He was kind to everyone. And they loved him for one more really important reason. Grandpa Allen was a fantastic baker. He baked delicious things. Everyone knew that if you came to a church event and Grandpa Allen had baked something, there was going to be something really, really, really good to eat. So, when it was time for the church to have their annual bread communion service, the church staff knew that the person to ask to volunteer was Grandpa Allen. So they called up Grandpa Allen and they said, Grandpa Allen, will you bake the bread for the church communion service? And Grandpa Allen said, of course, I will bake some bread. And he said, you know what, in fact, I am happy to bake all the bread. You don't need to ask any other volunteers. I'm happy to take care of all the bread needs for the church communion service. And everyone was thrilled. He took care of it all. That was great. Because they knew that whatever Grandpa Allen baked, it would be baked with love. He always said his secret ingredient was love. It was great. So the morning before Thanksgiving, the morning of the church bread communion service, they arrived at church, the people arrived, and Grandpa Allen was already there. He had made the dough at home, and he had come to church, and he was baking the bread in the church kitchen. So when the people arrived, the church smelled like baking bread. That delicious yeasty smell, the wonderful smell of baking bread. As the people walked into the building, they could smell it. Their mouths were watering as they walked into church and sat down. The whole church smelled delicious. And they sat down in their seats and they sang the opening hymns and they were just waiting. And the minister stood up and he talked about all the things we talk about at Bread and Cider Communion. He talked about the earth and the gift of wheat and the gifts that we get from the harvest. And the people sat there just waiting to taste this delicious bread that they could smell. And then it was finally time. And there the back doors opened and the minister signaled and in walked Grandpa Allen carrying this gorgeous golden brown loaf of bread, and he brought it forth to the front of the congregation. And a little boy sitting right out front said something that a few other members of the congregation were wondering, but they weren't going to say out loud. He said, "But Grandpa Allen, how is that one loaf of bread going to feed all of these people?" Because there were over 100 people there, and it was just one loaf of bread. And the other people started to kind of titter, and there were whispers. But Grandpa Allen, he didn't say anything. He just put his one loaf of bread down on the table, and he took out a knife, and he cut the bread in half. And the bread went sproing, and it multiplied into 2 whole loaves of bread. And then he cut the bread again, and it went sproing, and it multiplied into 2 more loaves of bread. And he cut it again, and it went sproing, and it multiplied into 2 more loaves of bread. And pretty soon, there were 10 loaves of bread, and there was plenty of bread to feed everyone in the congregation. And someone yelled out, "It's a miracle!" And Grandpa Allen said, "Don't be ridiculous. It's a perfectly simple mathematical principle." But they decided not to argue about it because everyone was hungry, and they were ready to have bread and finish their communion. So at coffee hour, everyone came up to Grandpa Allen, and they thanked him for the delicious bread, and they asked him about his recipe, and he said, of course, that it was made with love, and it was a mathematical principle, and that he was very happy that everyone enjoyed it. And then someone came up to Grandpa Allen. It was Barbara. And he knew that if Barbara was coming up to him, she was going to ask him for a favor, because Barbara was the director of religious education. So Barbara came up to Reverend Allen, and she said, Grandpa Allen. And she came up to Grandpa Allen, and she said, "Grandpa Allen, the youth group has been going to the food bank every Saturday. And every Saturday we run out of food because there are so many hungry people in our area. Would you come to the food bank with us? Would your bread trick work at the food bank?" And Grandpa Allen said, "Well, it's not really a trick, it's a mathematical principle." But she said, "Would it work?" "Yes, of course." So the next Saturday, Grandpa Allen brought a loaf of bread to the food bank. And sure enough, when he cut it in half, sprung, it multiplied. And now there were 2 loaves. And then again and again. And there was plenty of food to feed everyone at the food bank. Now, something special like this cannot stay secret for long. And sure enough, that night on the 6 o'clock news, there was a story about Grandpa Allen and his magical bread. And now we are going to meet the villain in our story. The villain was the sheriff of Nottingham, who you may know as a villain from a different story. So the sheriff of Nottingham, he was a very, very, very mean man. And I'm going to tell you how mean he was. You want to hear how mean he was? He was so mean. Here's how mean he was. He would tease puppies. He would take candy from children. He would say swear words in front of old people. That is how mean he was. He hated everybody, and he was always trying to do something to get rich quick. And when he saw Grandpa Allen's bread, he thought this was the greatest thing ever. If he could get his hands on that bread, he could make tons of loaves of bread, and he could sell that bread, and he would get lots and lots of money. So he decided to pay a visit to Grandpa Allen, and that's what he did. And so he asked nicely, and Grandpa Allen would not give him the bread. And Grandpa Allen said, "You don't understand, it wouldn't even work for you. It's nothing personal, but it's just not going to work for you." But the sheriff didn't understand that. So then the sheriff tried to buy the bread from Grandpa Allen. And Grandpa Allen said, I can't sell it to you. It's not going to work. And so then the sheriff tried to force Grandpa Allen to give him the bread. And eventually the sheriff just shoved Grandpa Allen out of the way, ran into the kitchen, stole the bread, and took it home with him. I told you he was not a nice guy. He took the bread home, he put it on his table, the sheriff cut the bread in half, and sproing. Do you know what happened? The bread divided, and divided and divided into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, until eventually it was just crumbs, and then it was just tiny, tiny particles, and then it was just absolutely nothing. And Grandpa Allen said, "I told you, it's a mathematical principle. Love multiplies, hatred divides." Thank you for listening to my story today.
Thank you, Chrissy, for that wonderful story. Love multiplies, hate shrinks and divides. Can you hear me if I speak out here? Can you hear me with this? Okay. So about 15 years ago, I went and acquired a license to be a psychotherapist because my mentor at the time, Rabbi Edward Friedman, had done that, and I thought, well, I need to do that. And I never intended to actually do psychotherapy. It was part of my work or my background to help me do what I do, which is to work with congregations in transition. But in the intervening time, I have found myself in situations on a number of occasions where I have been called upon to do psychotherapy, and interestingly enough, I ended up working with certain groups. The biggest one was couples. You would be shocked to hear this, but there's some couples that get into arguments and fights and contemplate divorce and whatnot. And the second group I worked with a lot was people who were around age 20. And the third group I worked with, to a lesser extent, was men going through a midlife crisis. And that does happen too. I know that might be a shock. But one of the things that struck me profoundly as I did this work, which I was glad to do, but it was not part of my main work. But one of the things that struck me is the diversity of people and people's problems, the nuances of people's problems. I mean, you can say that many people have difficulty with a marriage or with a relationship, but that's true, but the nuances of it are infinite. And the struggle of a person going through a midlife crisis of some kind, the details are infinite, but there's an underlying similarity. But I could not help but notice, amid all this diversity, that there were certain points of commonality. There were certain things that stood up and standed out and said, boy, this is an important aspect of every human life. And one of them had to do with the degree to which a child growing up in a home experienced being acknowledged, affirmed, cared for, noticed, affirmed in all the nuances of the personality of the child. So to an extraordinary degree, children growing up really don't ask for much, but they do want to be seen. They do want to be acknowledged. They do want to be heard. And their uniqueness needs to be affirmed in some way. And of course, we're all imperfect and we can't do that perfectly all the time, but it's a very great need. And if this does not occur, this is the other part of the pattern. If it doesn't occur, then that person is set for life on a journey to try to find love and affirmation somewhere. And so people will spend their entire lives looking for people who will acknowledge them, affirm them, and love them. And this leads to some problems, as you can imagine, sometimes. For example, a child may grow up in a household in which there's addiction. And the household is chaotic, and the child has to literally manage their own life and take care of mom or dad and do for mom and dad what they cannot do for themselves, or take care of the other children and so forth. So as they move into life as an adult, there goes with them this desire to find affirmation. There are infinite variations on the conditions that give rise to this basic pattern, but it always has a profound effect upon people. And one of them is this continual, lifelong search for love. And what I'm saying is not about blame. People act as they have been acted upon. And there's another side to this, a flip side to this need to be acknowledged and affirmed. As a person is growing up through their childhood, it is very important that they don't get the message that the world revolves around them, that everything should be driven to and oriented by indulging them. We could say that this is a balance in nurturing the self. And so through these experiences of psychotherapy, I learned that just as we have a body with physical needs, we have a self, an emotional, psychological, spiritual self, which needs to be nurtured. And that is an unconditional necessity of our lives, that we have to have our emotional, spiritual, and psychological selves nurtured. And by nurturing, I mean being seen and heard, feeling empathy from others, and being respected as a person. And I believe that one of the great functions of a church like this is to be a place where people are intentionally trying to create and sustain a community where people are genuinely seen, genuinely heard, genuinely feel empathy, and are respected as persons, no matter what their individual characteristics. And we may summarize all of this in one phrase: the nurturing of the self. What is true for the child is true for the adult. We, each of us, need nurturing as persons. We need the nurturing of others. We need the nurturing of ourselves to ourselves. Unlike nature, which is continually giving us things and nurturing us, we as persons can turn away and against from this need to nurture. And the central purpose of a church, I believe, or one of them, is to be a place where we nurture one another, where we nurture the self, and we grow. In a few moments, we will all join together in a ritual in which we will say these words and hear these words. Sharing this bread, we acknowledge that our lives, physical and spiritual, are sustained, are nourished by others, that we are part of a wide community that includes not only those around us in this moment, but the vast web of all existence. May it be so. For thousands of years, people all over the world have gathered on festive occasions to share in the eating of special foods and the drinking of special beverages. This custom is observed in the Jewish tradition as the Passover Seder, and in Christianity as the Eucharist, a Greek word meaning thanksgiving or communion.
It is also customary to celebrate the harvest. All over the world, countries and cultures hold harvest festivals and days of Thanksgiving to celebrate and appreciate the bounty of nature.
So today we celebrate and honor those traditions in our own special and unique way with fresh apple cider and freshly baked pumpkin bread. Both cider and pumpkin bread are symbolic of the fall harvest season. And so I invite you now, as you feel so moved and are willing and able, to come forward and to take a piece of pumpkin bread and a cup of cider and take them back to your seats. But please wait until you are invited to drink and eat. Bread is and has been for a very long time a common part of meals, human nourishment across time and cultures. Evidence of bread making is found as far back as 9,000 years ago in certain parts of Turkey and Europe. And bread has always been and will always be a product of nature, made by the gathering of the sun, the nourishment of earth, sustaining rain, working in partnership with human labor, knowledge, and skill. Bread is one of the many gifts of earth and nature which sustains us.
Sharing this bread, we confess that our lives, physical and spiritual, are sustained and nourished by others, that we are part of a wide community that includes not only those around us in this moment, but the vast web of all existence. Sharing this bread, we offer a wondering thanksgiving for all the earth provides, and we commit to being caretakers of the planet.
As we share this bread, we acknowledge our dependence upon and our participation in the world of nature. Sharing this bread, we acknowledge our dependence upon and our responsibility for the community of life. So let us join together and eat. I was greedy and got too big a piece to eat, and so it'll take me a bit to chew. Cider, too, is a gift of nature, the gift from a tree, nurtured by soil and sun, then harvested and pressed by human hands, given to us for our delight and sustenance.
Sharing this cider, we remember people of all ages who have poured themselves into the search for beauty, for truth, for goodness, and love. People who have brought us closer to each other, who have brought us closer to that great love that generations have sometimes known and named as God. Sharing this cider, may we feel gratitude for the goodness, the nourishment, and the love around us and within us. Sharing this cider, we acknowledge that we drink from the same cup as all of Earth's children. So let us enjoy and drink. With the sharing of food and drink, we acknowledge that we are one people, united in our search for love, justice, meaning, and purpose, united in our quest to build beloved community. With the sharing of food and drink, we acknowledge and proclaim that we are in communion with each other, with the earth, and with all its inhabitants. We affirm our commitment to life itself, knowing that the fate of future generations is in our hands by what we do, and that we are the holders of the hope of all our ancestors. Blessed be, and amen. May we join now in our closing hymn, number 32, Now Thank We All Our God. May we rise in body or in spirit as we are able for hymn number 32.
I wish each and every one of you a very happy and glorious and peaceful Thanksgiving, and I hope that you are able to share time with your friends and families during the week ahead. Please be mindful that in 10 minutes at 10:30 we will reconvene, or those who are interested will reconvene here for our delightful discussion about our wonderful new bylaws, and I invite each and every one of you to that discussion. Now may we join in the extinguishing of the chalice and our benediction. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come here embracing life, may life return your affection. And for those who come here to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Blessed be.